So I am a marketer, writer, and speaker by day, and a singer, actor, and fitness fiend by night.
Cakes, fitness, theater, motorcycling, hiking, kite. Let's talk time management, multitasking.
All right, let's play. There are a ton of overlaps between theater and marketing. So things like audience empathy, when we talk about voice and tone and truly understanding your audience, the audience wants you to succeed. They have come to hear something interesting. So when you do show a little bit more of yourself, people are more willing to buy.
The business is personal. For me, Belkins is personal.
The first thing, realizing that we bring our whole selves to every interaction. The facets of ourselves that we lean into, that's the differentiation.
Across all conversations that I have this season, if you ask me, Michael, what is one thing you have learned from all conversations that stood out? I would answer without thinking. It's the importance of storytelling and the value of a good narrative connected to a personal story. Today, I'm joined by Ashley Faus, marketer, writer, speaker by day, singer, actor, and fitness fiend by night. Well, that's what Ashley wrote in her bio. The intersection between personal and professional, with dropping all the facades, plays a huge role in developing any brand, both personal and business. And this is exactly what Ashley and I discussed today. Thank you and enjoy the episode. My PR team about a year ago asked to work on my LinkedIn summary and bio page. They said, Michael, you should define yourself in your own words, and the summary is your chance to put yourself set out there. So I've done probably 10 iterations to make it work, and I kind of made it work a bit, but I want to start off with you giving me your summary and bio. Who is Ashley Faus?
Sure. So I am a marketer, writer, and speaker by day, and a singer, actor, and fitness fiend by night. So I like to combine the personal and the professional a little bit. Humorously, I actually just got some feedback on my LinkedIn bio, which is fair because I feel like we need a support group where we all stand in a circle and every marketing expert just asks the person to their left to write their summary for them, or to write their resume for them, or to write their website copy for them, because it's so much harder to do for yourself. So for me, that kind of tagline of marketer, writer, speaker by day really gets at the professional side, and then singer, actor, fitness fiend by night gets at that personal side. And I think that's a good balance for me. But I agonized over those 6 words or those 6 things for quite a long time. And I wouldn't say that I actually like my longer form bio that much. My LinkedIn summary is other than my tagline, needs some work. I agree.
Why do you think so many people, including myself, are interested not just in what you do, but in you? What's so drowning?
I think that we have a lot of people. So the digital space has allowed us to have access to so many other people, but it's also allowed us to build echo chambers. And so we get in this sense where we joke about this on LinkedIn all the time, that it's such a bubble. You end up seeing the same people over and over again. They're saying the same thing over and over again. And it just feels like you're constantly having the same conversations. When you have somebody who's willing to have a conversation that's a bit more personal and share a little bit of that glimpse of here's the thing that makes me interesting. Yes, I think I have some interesting things to say about marketing, but all of that is informed by all of the stuff I do outside of work. That's what makes it feel interesting. That's what makes it feel like you're not just stuck in your same echo chamber. And so when you get a chance to actually connect with somebody on a human level, I think that's the thing that makes it more interesting and makes the marketing piece or the professional piece more interesting, because you're oh, you're informed by all of these other experiences, all of these other hobbies, all of the other things that you dedicate yourself to. It's not just come listen to me blather on about marketing, because you can get that from anywhere, depending on how you've kind of curated your echo chamber.
So one of the goals for my conversation with you today is to give opportunity for listeners to know you, real you, not just from the side of your profession. And you've done a lot of great keynotes on the thought leadership, content strategy, all of those really beautiful subjects, but actually on you as well, right? So I have these 3 strange questions, but I think that these questions will help to frame sort of like the dialogue that we're going to have in the next like 60, 90 minutes. All right. So Ashley, do you think you have a successful career?
I would say that I do. I think there is always room for improvement. I think one thing that is hard is, and again, this is true with social media and all of that, right? You have the opportunity to shape the stories that you tell to the rest of the world. And so the stories that we consume, in a lot of cases, are highly curated. So one phrase that I like about this is don't compare your messy middle with someone else's highlight reel. And so, yes, I would say that I've had a successful career. I think that like most people who are very driven and ambitious, I can go through and find all the people that I think have done better than me in different aspects, or better than me just in general, right? Like I can look at someone and say, wow, I care about these 5 things and they're better than me in all 5 of these things. But I would say yes.
I mean, I wanted to stop for a second and just acknowledge that, you work with Atlassian, one of the best companies out there, one of the best technology companies, that actually push innovation. I think a lot of people listening to our call or our interview, use a product of Atlassian in this or that form or shape, right? And you are director of integrated product marketing. So that's a good title. And what do you do as a director of integrated marketing?
So the title is a little bit humorous because basically I go across a number of different things. And so I'm a little bit of an oddball skill set. I do a bit of product marketing. So thinking about demos, tutorials, the onboarding journey, how do we acquire people into the product? I do some content strategy and distribution. So I've got content marketing and social media folks on my team. We also do email and community. So everything that goes into that content marketing mix. And then I built our associate product marketing program. So bringing in new talent, helping shape that next generation of marketing folks, which is something I'm very passionate about. I want this profession to continue to be really awesome. And so we need to keep bringing people in. So those are some of the big things that I'm doing in terms of strategy, team management, and deliverables.
Why did you decide to pursue your career with Atlassian?
So I've been at Atlassian for about 6 years now. So when I first started here, it's an exciting space. It's a good company. It was much smaller. I actually had several offers on the table at the time and really felt like from a values and culture standpoint, a work standpoint, a career trajectory standpoint, that all of that was in line with what I wanted to do. I've stayed because I've had the opportunity to continue growing. So, I'm not just hanging out and being like, yeah, I'm in a good spot. Let's chill. Yeah. I've definitely had conversations to say, here's what I want to do. Here's skills I want to develop. Here's the next step that I want to take. And Atlassian has continued to grow enough to be able to support that growth, both from a skills perspective and from a career perspective.
From a career's perspective, you just confirmed that you consider to have a successful career. What is your understanding of your successful career?
Sure. So this is an interesting question. I actually have gone through this exercise a couple of different times using, I call it the life satisfaction matrix, or a career satisfaction matrix. And for the nerdy listeners who are into mathy things, this is basically a weighted decision matrix. So you put in 5, in my case, this is what I do. I like to put in 5 categories. I like to say, here's how much each of these impacts my satisfaction. So is it 10%? Is it 5%? Is it 50%? Is it 20%? Then I like to rate how satisfied am I in each category. You multiply that out, add it up, you get a satisfaction score. So from my perspective, title is important to me. That is something that I think is representative of the scope and the breadth of the work. It's also indicative of the impact of the work. Obviously, the higher you go, the more breadth, scope, and impact you're having. I do think that the elements of the actual work, like, do I like the deliverables? Do I like the way I spend my time each day? So again, you can call that whatever you want. But I call it, I tend to call it deliverables or like the actual work. Obviously, compensation is a factor. I know people love to say like, no, it's not about the money. And I'm like, I do a lot of things for free. I don't work for free. Like, that's not what I'm here for. I am here to make money. In terms of thinking about success, money is a measurement of how much impact and how much, work and breadth of scope and success you're having, particularly in tech. I think it's different if you're in nonprofits or if you're in more of a serving or helping profession. I think those should also be compensated well, but especially from a scaling perspective in the tech world, the compensation is important. In terms of work-life balance, I actually take more of an integrated philosophy, so work-life integration, but am I able to live the lifestyle that I want to live? And the answer is yes. I can make it and do shows at night if I want to. I feel like I get to have an opportunity to do cool work and that I'm able to lean into work, but that I'm able to lean into my hobbies. So that balance. And then I think that fifth piece around growth, and not just am I climbing the ladder, but really am I growing my skills? Do I feel like I'm making progress? Do I feel like I am advancing my profession as well? Not just am I advancing my career, but is the profession of marketing growing and improving and making incremental progress? So that's kind of some of the factors that I look at. And then obviously I weight them and rate them and say, here's how happy I am. And in theory, it spits out a score. And if that score is, in the 90s, you get an A, because I like that style of thing. I'm a type A kind of overachiever. So but I do think that it is worth evaluating each of those factors. And if you find that you're constantly in a negative headspace, if you find that you're unmotivated, sitting down and looking at those factors and saying, okay, is there one thing that's really driving this dissatisfaction or negativity? Is it all the things? Okay, do I need to reevaluate what I say I value? Do I need to be more clear on the things that I say I want? Because if I say that I have everything I want and I'm still dissatisfied, right. Okay, maybe I need to want different things. So those are a couple of things that I look at as well. And again, why I say that you do have to take time to realize the wins, to set goals for yourself, recognize when you've achieved them, and not just keep moving the goalpost to say, oh, when I get to director, then I'll really be happy. Oh, well, now it's got to be senior director. Now it's got to be BVP. Now it's got to be SVP. Or when I hit this certain compensation bracket, right? Then I'll really be happy. Yeah. Well, then you hit it and now you say, oh, it's actually got to be 20% more, 30% more, 40% more, right? So I do think there is that balance between striving and recognizing the wins and being content.
Now, also just to reconfirm, are you happy and fulfilled?
I'm going really deep this morning. Here's the thing. I think it is hard. I think it is constant. It is a constant challenge to find that balance when you are ambitious, when you like to be busy, when you like to feel like you are making those improvements. I think, yes, when I look at my life, I think I've built a great life. I think I've built a great career. When I look at the next thing, it's hard to say, okay, cool, I'm good where I am, right? No, yeah, so I think it is a constant balance between striving for that next thing and saying, I've already been striving. I set these goals. I achieved them. And if I look at how I get to spend my time and I look at the type of work, the type of people, the type of things I get to do, I like those things. You ask me what I want. It's like, yes, I really like my life. I really like my job. I like my team, right? So I would say yes, but I do think that it is something that I do have to try to be, because otherwise I get so caught up in the striving that I'm like, there's yet another mountaintop, right? And it's fun. It feels good to climb up the mountain, but you do have to take that time once you get up there to look around and say, I summited it. The view is amazing. And I'm going to high five the people who came up the mountain with me.
One of the previous podcasts that I had was John Barrows, and he mentioned an interesting thing when we were finishing off. He said that usually when people are getting married or on their day on their wedding, they say, well, this is one of the best days of my life, or this is the best day that I could have, or whatever. And he said that this shouldn't be the best day of your life. It should be the beginning of the best days that come in, right? So tomorrow, the day after will be better, right? So obviously you should feel happy right now, but it doesn't mean that you can be happier tomorrow or the next year, right? It's just the journey to more happiness, right? And you can just expand on that. So I like the answer. And now, this is the kind of my last question on this block, but you mentioned, well, I would say like it's not a life philosophy. It's more like a framework of decision-making framework that you do. But do you have other, let's say, life philosophies that help you to get where you are with your career, with your fulfillment, with your happiness?
I think one big thing that I always try to do, and my husband and I talk about this a lot for our life together as well, is this decision or is this step going to take us closer or further away from the goal we've set? I think what happens is a lot of times people set very far goals. In 5 years, I want to do this thing. In 10 years, I want to be in this place. But they forget to walk back. Okay, each step takes you there. So I do a fair amount of hiking and backpacking and those kinds of things. And so I talk about this all the time of like, if you take one step off the path, you can still see the path, you can still see the destination. You can take 1 or 2 steps off the path, get back on, no problem. If you start taking 10 steps off the path, it gets harder to find it. If you're 100 steps off the path, you might be spinning in circles trying to find the path. And at some point, you've gone completely the wrong way. It's a fork in the road. It's taking you all the way back to a completely different trailhead. And you don't even know where your car is. And you're like, how did I get here? Well, you got there one step at a time. That first step was not the problem. Honestly, the 10th step was not even the problem. So that's something that I do try to do, is to evaluate, is this the type of person that I want to be? Are these the choices that I want to make? And then do they get me closer or further away? Is it a short diversion? Is it a long diversion? Am I actually wanting to go somewhere else? That's one thing. I think the second thing that has really stuck with me, I read Atomic Habits by James Clear, which I really liked. And his comment was, a lot of people, again, they'll set goals, but they don't understand the action that leads to those goals. And so one of the things that he said is, make choices as if you are already that type of person. So if you say, I want to be fit and healthy. Okay, what kinds of choices does a person who is fit and healthy make? So I'm going to make a choice as a healthy person today, not I'm not going to eat ice cream or something like that, right? So those are two things that I think, realizing the impact of the incremental gains or the incremental losses, and making those choices to get back on the right path or to be the person that you say you are, or the person that you say you want to be. Don't wait until you have the proof points that you are that person. Do the proof points along the way, and that's how you become that person.
Wow. All right. So we frame up our conversation. So we kind of set it up so people know where we're coming from in terms of, with my next question. So right at the beginning, you mentioned that you have an integrated work-life balance, right? Or integrated work-life. And that the reason why your brand and you stand out on whatever, right, is the fact that you bring that personal side of yourself, that personal aspect of who you are, etc. And I loved how you put it out on your website. You put it as out of the office activities, right? So you post a lot about your out of the office activities, baking, traveling, theater, and we're going to talk more about it later. So I just kind of wanted to frame up for the listeners how many of different things you are doing in your life. But as a marketer, can you explain to me why people love reading this type of content on platforms like LinkedIn, which are meant to be more professional?
As humans, we all love stories. And so I think it's a lot easier to relate to the stories than it is to just come out and say, so I'll give a perfect example with the baking thing. I've written about this a couple of different times, this concept called I don't even actually know how you properly pronounce it. I think it's mise en place, right? It's a French term that means everything in its place. And the premise is that you measure out all of your ingredients, you put out all of your bowls, you put out all of your tools. Before you start baking, before you start preheating the oven, before you do anything, you set out all of your tools and ingredients in all of the right measurements. This helps you know you have everything. It helps make sure that you've got it in the right quantities. It helps make sure that you're doing it in the right order. It just makes everything faster. So that is very relatable. People have that concept. If I just tell you step 1, map out all of the steps of content strategy. Step 2, write out every topic you want. It's like, how many topics do I need? How do I know if I have all the topics? Clearly, there's a big gap between step 1, write out all the steps to content strategy, and step 2, write out all the topics. Like, that is a big gap. How do I fill it? But when I frame it up that everyone has had the experience of trying to cook something or bake something and realizing that they're missing a piece or they're missing a tool or they're missing an ingredient, and that sense of like, dang it, I'm in the middle and now I have to run to the store or now I have to see if I can substitute. That sense of being kind of frantic is something that everyone has had at some point in their life. So the analogy of what if you use mise en place, I'm American, I'll say mise en place, that's easier. What if you use that same mindset to approach a product launch or to approach a campaign or to approach an email campaign or something like that? That immediately clicks to say, oh, I understand why this is important. It's not a waste of time. It bounds it, right? If you're going to make a cake, you don't need to have 10 types of cocoa powder, 10 types of flour, 10 different brands of butter. No, you need the right quantities of the right ingredients with the right tools. And so it's a multi-layer framing of this. And so that's something that is a lot easier for people to kind of grok and grasp onto. And so it sticks with you from a mindset standpoint and kind of an emotional standpoint, but it also makes it a lot easier to approach. Like I saw something on LinkedIn the other day that was like, here's your 47-step cheat sheet. And I was like, okay, if there's 47 steps, like I'm just not going to do any of the steps. Like that is so many steps. I cannot, right? And so I think when you frame it up in terms of things that other people do or in concepts that are more bounded, it's more approachable and people feel like, okay, I can take some of these steps or I can do this one thing to set myself up well. I think the other thing is that it stands out. Like who doesn't like to see pictures of cakes in their feed? I would much prefer to see a picture of a cake than a screenshot with 10-point font of a 47-step checklist. Like, even if I eventually do click over and say, oh, I'm going to download this PDF with the checklist, but you gave me a fun cake beforehand. You teased it a little bit. And so that's something too, where I think that it's just a little more interesting and it feels more approachable and it's something different. It interrupts the feed where it's like, why is there cake in my feed? Why is there a theater, some ridiculous costume in my feed? But I've built up enough of that trust with my audience that they know I'm not just doing a Facebook or Instagram post. Somehow I'm going to bring it back around. So there's even that piece where it's like, how is she going to relate this to marketing? Like, can you bring this around? How much of a stretch is this going to be? Right. So that's another fun challenge for me. It keeps it interesting for me too, where I'm like, I have this brilliant idea. Is it smart? Can I connect it? Can I explain this? So those are a couple of the different reasons why I think it's more interesting. It's more fun for the creator and for the audience, but it is actually helpful as well.
And then people can relate. You mentioned cakes, right? If I relate to cakes and it stand out for me, and obviously I have a certain kind of education after that, but then it's interesting because this is exactly what you just mentioned a few minutes ago about the fact that every content creator in your niche are in a certain bubble where you talk about the same topics again and again and again with the same people. So this is, something that happens for me when I'm doing research, preparing for the guest. I spend my time, I do the research, I listen to all the interviews, I read all the articles, I read all the posts, everything. And I'm trying to get the idea of who I'm talking to, who that person is, what that person stands for, etc. And right now, when I am booking a podcast with someone that has, let's say, 500,000-700,000 people and followers on LinkedIn, it's hard for me to find who that person is, right? I know, or I can learn a lot about, let's say, SEO or email marketing or anything, but even, like finding something that, that besides this, subject matter that a person has, finding someone that other than that people can relate to is difficult, right? And something that fascinated me and that attracted my attention was your blog, how you post it, what you do that, and kind of the energy that you and the vibing that you can get from that. And that's something that relates, that I can relate to, and that I wanted to kind of work with that person or engage with them, right? This is just my message to everyone who is listening to this, that on my journey of recording my podcast right now, I'm speaking to a lot of really talented people like Ashley that, and they all tell the importance of storytelling, of the personal part of the story and the narrative, and the importance of the narrative in not just building brand, personal, or their business, but generally building a success and creating value through narrative, through the brand. And a lot of people that I work with, or businesses that we service, they don't think about the narrative. They don't think about that storytelling part of it, and which is very important. They just produce the content or build that bubble of the thought of the subject matter, but not putting that. But then I personally, something that I'm not concerned with, something I'm afraid of, is putting myself out there and then people don't understand me, right? And they don't support. So there will be judgment, there will be booking. They will say, oh, that's some kind of bullshit or whatever. So did you have, and again, I know that you are, you're playing in a theater. So, kind of creating something for the audience to listen to and engage with, and they might not relate and might not engage, might not like, and being afraid of that is every actor go through that. They wouldn't like my play or something, or my part, right? But then do you have a certain, I wouldn't say a message, but a recommendation or advice from me as the person who is afraid of putting my personal life out there on LinkedIn, and how is there something that I can do to kind of battle that?
Yeah, this is hard. I think there's a couple of things. I think one is realizing that consistency is really the most important thing. It's not so much about where you draw the line between the personal and professional, but that you draw that line consistently. Every so often I'll test something where I'll go basically 100% personal. And usually that content performs poorly because that's not what my audience wants or expects from me. They expect me to tie the personal and professional together. So that's what I would say in terms of, will people like it? Maybe. But if you only do it every so often and it's jarring, that's usually the reason you get backlash. And yes, if you're taking a stand and you're standing out, somebody is going to dislike you. I know there are plenty of people who would look at my feed and be like, this is stupid. Why do you put cakes there? This is stupid. Why do you talk about fitness? And it's like, it works for me. For the people who it resonates with, it really resonates. Totally fine if you don't like it. There are a ton of other people that you can learn marketing from. So that's cool. I actually don't need everybody to like me. And if I'm standing out and I'm putting out something that is interesting and thought-provoking, yeah, there's going to be some people who either disagree or decide to unfollow because my style of content and my style of curation is just like not their vibe.
Let's talk about the intersection between business and professional. First, I wanted to get our terminology right. So what's your understanding of that kind of intersection?
So from a philosophy standpoint, we all bring our whole selves to every interaction. There's no sense of like, I just don't exist as a sister or a wife or, a baker or a theater person, like those don't go away when I get on a Zoom call or I walk into the office. Similarly, I'm not a marketer when I'm at the gym. I'm not a worker for a company. Like I don't stop being an employee of Atlassian just because I happen to be at the gym for an hour, right? So I think that's the first thing, realizing that we bring our whole selves to every interaction. The facets of ourselves that we lean into, that's the differentiation. So I don't usually bring Gym Ashley to work. Gym Ashley is kind of aggressive. She's kind of intense. She's on a mission. She's real focused. And I've had numerous people, I try to be better about this, but especially when I was younger, people would say, oh, I saw you at the gym, but you kind of looked like you were like real focused. So I didn't want to bug you. And I was like, oh, you should have said hi. And they're like, you didn't seem like you were in a place to say hi. And I was like, oh, okay, right. In contrast, I don't really bring work Ashley to the gym because work Ashley tries to be more collaborative and tries to be more approachable. Okay, if I need to get in and get out and get my sets done, we got things to do, right? So that's not to say that I'm no longer an employee or that I no longer care about lifting weights. It's just the facets of ourselves that we lean into. So I think from a philosophical perspective, the realization that we bring our whole selves to every interaction, it's just a matter of leaning into which kind of elements of our life and our choices and our expertise and our skills we lean into at different moments.
Now, help me to understand, can I have this personal, professional intersection, not just as the person, but as the business, to putting more personal into developing business and developing brand and developing companies? Is there any kind of intersection when we think about how do I build a business that is more me, that is more personal, that is more oriented to creating those connections with people, minds, and hearts, and not necessarily just with the spreadsheet and kind of P&L and ROI calculator?
So people trust people like themselves. They buy from people that they trust, they hire or go work for people that they trust. And so when you do show a little bit more of yourself, people are more willing to buy. I think some of the best examples of this, you find that all of the kind of hobby spaces, so the golf courses or the gym memberships are like, yeah, I play tennis, right? Like this is kind of a trope in the law firms, right? About playing tennis together or playing golf together. Right. There's a reason that those spaces outside of the office came up. Now there's obviously some problematic stuff in history where certain people were excluded from those interactions, but I think we're making progress to say, how do we have those interactions? I think it's also, some of that aspirational lifestyle stuff, especially for lifestyle businesses like real estate. There's a fellow who is kind of in my network, and he sells luxury real estate, and he curates kind of this perspective that he is the type of person, like, I can trust you. You have good taste. So when you tell me that this home is a great buy, it's in a great location, the neighborhood is happening, there's great bars and restaurants, there's amazing theater, the home is the height of luxury, the finishes are luxurious. I believe you because I see that you wear well-tailored clothes. I see that you are spending time with a lot of people who appear to be wealthy. And so it's like, oh, if you're telling me that this house is worth the money, and I can't afford the real estate that he sells, but like, if I could afford the real estate, right? He has curated this kind of brand and this image, and he is in the spaces to meet the types of people that have this kind of money. And so it's not, hey, I have to go seek you out because now I have an extra $2 to $20 million to throw around on a mansion. It's, oh, you were also hanging out at this charity golf tournament, or, oh, you were also at this, in a lot of cases, art gala or something, hanging out with all of us. And it just so happens that something you just got a listing that hasn't even come onto the market yet, but we're at the art gallery and we're talking to each other. And I mentioned that, yeah, I'm thinking I might be in the market for a home. And it's like, oh, what kind of home are you into? Well, if you find this piece of art interesting, you may be looking for something a bit more modern and abstract. Fun fact, this house is about to come onto the market. I love to book a showing ahead of it coming onto the market, right? You get this sense of, wow, I'm exclusive. He has exclusive access. And then obviously if you're the seller who's booked with him, it's like, cool, he's bringing buyers before we even start the official marketing push, right? So that's a way that just as an extreme example of kind of orienting your life to be around your ideal customer profile and to build that trust and relationship so that it's not, I'm now trying to force you and attract you only when you're ready to buy. It's building that existing relationship so that kind of that luck and hard work is what actually makes opportunity, right? It's not forcing this facade. It's actually living your life in this way.
Interesting that you mentioned the kind of framed it as a lifestyle, because when you buy real estate and you see someone creating content about the real estate per se, right? Then it's like, yeah, they kind of are marketing their product, right? Whereas with the lifestyle, you mentioned like, I believe him, I trust him because he has a taste or she has a taste. And how do I see that? Because the way they are posting or creating content is not just around the housing and real estate, but rather it's also about the sort of like, you know, what they're wearing, what they're buying, what they're going, so you see that you like the way a person sort of like approaches certain objects, and you feel like it's the way I like them, so I can rely on his or her feedback or opinion to kind of to get that right done, right? What if I run a software business or like a lead generation agency, right? Can we sit on this and sort of like brainstorm for a minute? How can I be personal with my lifestyle, like to show my customers that it's not just about the leads and it's about the ROI, but there are other things that to build the trust, to build that connection with them. Any thoughts on this? Helping the lead generation founder?
It is definitely harder if it's, a software company or lead gen agency or something like that. I will say, particularly for software companies, so this comes up pretty frequently. I don't specifically talk about Atlassian or our products all the time on my LinkedIn feed or on podcasts. But if somebody is saying, hey, I'm looking to do a marketing campaign, does anybody have templates? Of course, I'm going to pop in. And usually I do it a little bit cheeky just because that's kind of how I've curated my voice, to be like, allow me to be a corporate shill for a minute, or allow me to sell you some products, right? Like not to swoop in and sell you stuff, but Atlassian has these templates from, for Confluence to help you run these. Or did you know that you can sign up with Trello for free, or you can sign up to 10 people on Jira for free? And that's, how we think about this. Or like, I'm happy to tell you more, or hey, if you don't want me to spam your comments with this, like, let's take it into the DMs and I'm happy to share demos or blog posts or tutorials, right? So yes, there are a number of value propositions. And again, if you're hanging out in the right spaces, if your goal is ultimately to build this brand in service of, build a personal brand in service of a company or in service of a product, talking about those topics. So in my case, it would be things like, let's say I was specifically trying to curate a brand to promote Atlassian, talking about teamwork, talking about asynchronous work, talking about how to organize work, talking about project management, talking about templates. There are plenty of kind of productivity gurus for whom those topics would be a perfect fit. They could talk about Trello, they could talk about Jira, they could talk about Confluence every single day. I mean, they should probably also talk about other tools and other hacks and those kinds of things. Otherwise, it's just like, okay, whatever, you're just an Atlassian shill. But if that's what you're trying to build, that lifestyle of here's how I hack my calendar, here's how I structure my day to squeeze every minute out of it, here's how I keep track without having to keep 100 tabs open. All three of those things could be product agnostic, but they dovetail very nicely with, in this case, the collaboration software that Atlassian makes, if we're going on that example. So It is harder if you're not like a lifestyle influencer or something like that. Like that's part of the reason why that market is quite saturated, particularly on Instagram or TikTok, is that, yeah, it's a lot easier to be like, let me tell you what outfits I like, because, you know, we all have to get dressed every day. I don't need to buy collaboration software every single day, but I do need to stay organized, communicate with my team, figure out how to deal with my calendar, figure out how to deal with all of my to-dos, measure whether I'm actually being effective in all of the things that I'm doing. And so that would be an area where I could lean in from a topic perspective and share some of those insights. And again, it could be something, we've had a couple of folks write more personal things. Like one of them was, I ran my kids like an Atlassian team, and it was over the summer. And so they basically had their like Kanban board and they were running it. Several people have planned their wedding using Jira or Trello, and they obviously do a whole write-up about that. We had somebody, he is a phenomenal composer, lyricist, book writer. He's into musical theater as well. He created this virtual play, like musical, that he wrote and filmed all virtually. It was during the pandemic. And he did this insane production schedule on Trello, and then obviously like did a whole write-up about it. And it has nothing to do with Atlassian, right? He is an Atlassian, so it was kind of that personal and professional, but that would be something where a lot of people who were trying to produce a similar experience would love his template, because it's like, I mean, and I watched the video. It was like an hour-long musical, and it was insane. Like the quality was phenomenal. And the fact that he powered that whole production with Trello, and you can sign up for Trello for free, like that's an excellent story that he can tell that dovetails nicely. Again, we've had a number of people, like I say, you know, weddings and kids, and I'm planning my move, I'm planning my travel, you know, my spouse and I are both like, I got him a free Confluence account and we go through and, you know, talk about things. So there's a lot of different ways that people do bring in our products into their personal life. So it's not just the business case, but it's like a nice tie-in if they want to talk about it from more of a lifestyle perspective.
Business is personal. For me, Belkins is personal. And that's why, and you gave really great examples of kind of tying the product into the personal lifestyle. And what I'm trying to do very often is I'm trying to kind of open up the door to see how my company operates with regards to how I work with people, what templates I'm using, what dashboards, how analytics works, what are my results, what I suck at, right? What actually I'm, you know, like not necessarily just servicing the clients, but generally how the internal process is set up, how we build the KPI for our SDRs or for our marketing team, and why we use this or not that, right? Because it's not tying actually into our product that we offer, but it shows the way we're dealing with problems, the way we are thinking, and what's the vision and how we're servicing customers. Not necessarily, hey, this is what the results we generated with the customer, but rather like, hey, this is the delivery process that was done by that person with this kind of outcomes. The reason I brought up the intersection between personal and business, the last time we had a quick chat, you've mentioned this book that kind of changed or reshaped your understanding of how the world works. It's the Medici Effect by Franz Johansson, right? So, and you mentioned that you read it in college, right? So take me back to where you were in college. You discovered the Medici Effect. So he talks about bringing concepts from one field to another, right? So what was so special about the book that we talk about it now, 15 years later?
That book was actually assigned to me, and I want to say it was assigned during like a new product development class. So I was, majoring in marketing. I was part of this program called NPD. It was a brand new program at my school, kind of an experimental thing. And so I was in a class specifically focused on coming up with new products. And that book was assigned as a way to say, how do you suss out problems? How do you think about different solutions and why your solution might be better than existing solutions. And then how do you troubleshoot the challenges? And so many of us are focused on like, I personally have this problem. I tried to solve it in these 3 ways. It can't be solved. Well, okay, has anyone else had this problem, right? Like I just posted this on LinkedIn this morning. I was like, hello, I'm back again for more help with calendaring, right? Like I have found a few things that work well for me to kind of keep my calendar under control. Been through a period over the last couple weeks where I feel like I'm losing control of my calendar again. So I've tried to implement the tactics that I've used in the past. They're not working effectively. Cool. Other people have this issue. How are they solving it? And I've gotten some great recommendations in the comments. I've talked about how can I automate. I feel like this solution works, but it's hard to implement manually. Is there a way for me to automate adding a buffer before and after meetings? Or is there a way for me to refuse to have the next meeting if I'm in a certain number of back-to-back meetings or something, right? Like this is a solvable problem, but I can only see it in the way that I've tried to solve it before. Medici Effect gives a lot of really practical advice and examples to help you get out of that. And so in my case, I've learned like, man, if I have this issue, somebody else probably does as well. And I can put it out there on LinkedIn and ask for help, and I'll actually get a lot of really good feedback. If I'm by myself and I don't have access to a community of people like that, how can I force myself out of this one narrow way of solving the problem? So one of the examples it gives is like, go on a walk and pick 2 random objects that you see on your walk and try to force them together in some way. Doesn't matter, like could be a word association, could be a feeling, could be how might they create a house, right? Like just something to force these 2 random objects together. Just get your brain not so focused on, okay, I have to go for a walk around the neighborhood in only 2 minutes because I've got my next meeting, right? Like, what if you just go for a walk and the things that you see on the walk, you try to kind of force them together? So I think that was the biggest thing for me, was just the creativity that's possible and the innovation that's possible when you bring people from diverse skill sets and backgrounds, or like even opposing like skill sets and backgrounds. How do we balance these 2 things to solve this problem? So, and then just some of the examples, right? Like they had architects learning from, I think it was termites. And they were trying to do this crazy building in a really hot climate where it was like in the hundreds during the day, but at night it was in the 50s because it was a desert, but they didn't have access to electricity to be able to like heat and cool the building. So how do they regulate the temperature of this building? And so the architects are going round and round and round, and they finally end up speaking to, I can never remember, I think it's an etymologist is the one who studies insects. And they're like, oh yeah, this happens all the time in nature, ant farms, termite nests, like, yeah, animals do this. And it's like, wait, how do the animals do this? And so they started to kind of combine that knowledge to come up with a way basically to construct this building so that airflow, that they could basically take advantage of the cooler temperatures at night to regulate the temperatures during the day. This is another thing that I think has been studied a number of times, like butterflies, birds, like swarms. How do swarms of insects not run into each other? Is there something we can learn from that as humans to apply to air traffic or car traffic, right? So those are some of the obvious examples that now looking back, you're like, that makes perfect sense. But like, what are those collisions of random fields that we haven't found yet? And how do you go about finding those collisions or creating those collisions? So that's why it was so transformative for me. And that's something where every so often, if I get in a spiral trying to solve a problem, I'm like, wait. I think I'm doing this wrong. I think I'm coming at it from a very specific set of assumptions, skills, and expertise that are mine. But is there a way that I can ask someone for help, or is there someone else who can help me solve this that has different skills and different expertise?
When I thought about bringing concept from one field to another, I was thinking about, let's say an example, changing field or adding fields. And when I'm thinking about your career and I see content creation, I see public speaking, I see podcasting, I see theater, I see, a lot of other things that you're doing, sort of like expanding your field of knowledge. You just mentioned fitness and bringing ideas from one another. So when you just mentioned the methodology is to, when you have a problem, you go after and find the solution in a different field to the same problem, right? Do you apply the same concept for yourself into expanding the field and trying something else, and then kind of using one field that you are kind of pretty good at and solving the problem of another field?
I think this is a perfect example of, when I talk about content strategy, for example, my go-to example is actually a fitness example. The Misa in place thing, like how do I think about setting up a project or a launch or a campaign, that Misa in place mindset shift. I think that, there are a ton of overlaps between theater and marketing. So things like audience empathy, when we talk about voice and tone and truly understanding your audience, that's something that I do a lot. I tend to be in the ensemble for shows. And so I'm constantly having to change costumes and motivations and emotions and what is my face doing and what does my costume look like and how am I walking on, how am I walking off, how do I enter, how do I exit this moment? That's something that comes up a lot in terms of like stage theater, like public speaking or within marketing if I'm context switching across different audiences. So those are things from my own life that I just naturally pull in. I do try to read other works from other fields. So for example, I actually there's a couple of physical pen testers. So from a security standpoint, there's a whole field, it's called penetration testing. And it's basically about how do you hack things, people, systems, buildings, security badges, etc. I'm fascinated. I don't know if you saw the movie Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio, but and Tom Hanks, but the counterfeiting, the social engineering that he did is fascinating. Like I'm actually really fascinated by the whole pen testing space because there's actually one that I follow. Her name is Jack Hyde. She talks a lot about the social engineering and psychological aspects. She's like, the technology is not the hard part. It's getting into the building that's the hard part. And she's got all sorts of stories of crazy things she's did. She's like, fun fact, everyone will hold the door for a pregnant woman. And she's like, I've tried this multiple times on the most secure campuses. And she's like, sometimes it's hard, right? Sometimes I have to carry 2 boxes and put out like a fake pregnancy belly and like kind of act like I'm struggling with these boxes. Every time somebody will open the door right up and be like, oh, do you need help? She's like, oh, I got one person to like carry the boxes directly of like my hacking material directly into the office that I, with the server room, right? Yeah. Because that's what people are wired to do. And I'm like, fascinating. How the heck does that apply to me as a marketer? Well, one of the things that she said at one point was like, oh, I love a good first day tour where an employee will post a picture of their badge on, LinkedIn or on Twitter. They'll do a little video of the office walking around. They'll show me their desk. I get a floor plan layout and I've managed social media in the past and I'm like, guys, no one is allowed to put pictures of their badges anywhere, right? Like, make sure that whatever's in your screen, if you're taking pictures of the office or you're filming in an event, that whatever is on the background of that screen, way in the back, that's not in the shot, is not proprietary information. Like, why do I follow this person and what can I possibly learn from her? And then when I do learn something that's useful, being able to make that connection, like having an open enough, I guess pathway in my brain that she made that comment about, badges and first day walkthroughs. And I could then apply that and say, okay, this is how this applies to me if I'm doing on the ground social media for my company or at an event.
It's like being curious, but also paying attention, right? Yeah. Paying attention to everything and learning from those, right? Because very often on the job, or even when you learn something, we don't pay attention to other things that are happening. It's like when you are, working in the team and you have a manager and very often you focus on, here is the agenda, this is how we work, this is how we get the product. But then you don't look at how manager or someone that is leading the project behaves in terms of how they present the data, how they talk, what they do, how they sort of like go with the flow, and what is the flow, and then learning that to apply in your future position as the leader in that other team or something, right? And paying attention, because it's very often, it's actually one of the guests that I had on said that it's one of the regrets that he had is not paying attention when he kind of started. And I know this for a fact from your blog. So you pay a lot of attention. You're observing a lot of things and learning. Is that something that has been with you throughout your entire life? Have you always been curious, or that was the Medici Effect that by Johansson that led you to being that embracing, curious, and attentive to kind of not the details, but to different these fields and kind of consuming and being open to those fields?
I would say I've always been into it. I think that, growing up, my parents had a really good philosophy, which was that if you commit to something, you have to commit for the whole season. And then after the season, then you can change. So I played soccer for a couple of seasons. Then I did volleyball and track. Like I did piano lessons for a while. I was doing gymnastics for a while until I kind of found my niche. I got the opportunity. I actually had some friends who were homeschooled. And so they had this like enrichment program, which was like Civil War reenacting, right? So I grew up in Texas. And so I got the chance to go with one of my friends when I was in elementary school to these Civil War classes and like learn these dances and learn all about the different attire. And then we actually got to go to one of the reenactments. And like my mom sewed me a whole costume and we were supposed to behave a certain way and like all of this, right? And it's just fascinating that, there are, Renaissance fairs, for example, are really big. And I think just being open to those experiences, because I had personal connections with people who were doing things that were slightly different than me. And then obviously as I've become an adult, really trying to take that mindset of asking questions and saying, just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad or it's wrong. That's not to say that I have to like every single thing or that I have to nerd out about every single thing, but if I can approach it and say, okay, this is interesting to someone, why? And then I can make that determination for myself. And it was kind of the same thing growing up, that there's some people who just like love playing piano. Turns out I don't personally love it. I didn't really like to practice. I was really terrible at it. I've tried to play piano off and on. My piano skills are kind of crap. But man, there's some people who are really good at it and they love it. And I think that's awesome. And we can collaborate. I can sing, they can play, right? So I think that's the other piece of it, where a lot of people, I think, approach these activities or these ideas with the mindset that they have to internalize and adopt them. I don't think that's true. I think you can understand, you can learn, you can look at and interact with people who are very passionate about these things. But that doesn't mean that you have to fill your life with these things or that you have to adopt them in order to kind of understand or have that curiosity and respect.
Let's talk confidence. You seem to be a confident person. Were you always confident?
Yes. And I would say I was bordering on cocky when I was young. I hope that I have gotten wiser to not be so cocky. But yes, I have always been quite bold, quite confident, and little bit of arrogance and cockiness, especially when I was young. But I was like, I know, I'm right, done, solved it.
Where this confidence came from? You mentioned that from the very early age, you were enrolled into a lot of different activities. So you had a lot of empirical experience with this or that. So like you tried, so you kind of can define for yourself what you like, what you don't like. And you kind of early at the age were able to phrase out who are you, what you like, what you want, and that sort of gave you the confidence to kind of speak out your wish and desire. That was the key, or there was something else in there that kind of helped you to kind of develop that confidence in you?
I feel like it's a little bit of both nature and nurture. So I think I kind of was born like this. I think I came out being, there was a joke a number of jokes that like in preschool, I always like sat up very straight. And anytime the teacher had a question, it was like my hand was the first one up, right? Then I got into elementary school and my report card constantly said, you know, Ashley is very engaged in class, but she needs to learn to raise her hand. So I think I was there's an element of this where I was kind of born this way. I do think that having the opportunity, I did theater from a young age, I did sports from a young age. And so that cycle of feedback, sometimes I succeeded, sometimes I was rejected, but there were more opportunities after that. And I got feedback on why I was rejected or how I could improve. I think that helps build up this sense that you can chase things and it's okay to fail. And even if you fail, fine, let's look at why. So I think it's a little bit of nature and nurture. I think I kind of came out this way, and then I think I was fortunate to have friends, parents, teachers, you know, bosses as I got older, professors who were willing to give me that tough feedback to really help me hone the areas that I needed to improve. And I think that also helped temper a little bit of that cockiness that like, I know everything. You can't tell me anything. I think now that I'm in my 30s, I realize that in fact, I still have room for improvement and things to learn.
Are you as confident in meetings on stage, on panels? And I mean, stage is a totally different ballgame. What's your scariest performance you gave?
Oh man, scariest performance. Actually, auditions are scarier than performances because the whole point of an audition is for people to judge you. They're trying to decide, are you right for this part? Are you right for this cast? Do you have the skills? Do you have the look? Do you have chemistry with whoever else we're trying to put in, right? So auditions, I think, are actually the scariest or the worst performances that I give because the whole point is to be judged. Once you actually get to the performance, and this is true for public speaking, panels, podcasts, creative endeavors, the audience wants you to succeed. They have come to hear something interesting or see a good show or have a cool conversation. They want you to succeed. So that is a much more welcoming space. And you've practiced, you've prepared, you know that whatever you're giving is exactly what the director wants or exactly what the audience expects, or you wrote out the abstract and your presentation matches, right? The expectations and criteria are very clear and you've already had all the time to prepare and the audience is excited to see you do well, right? Versus an audition, it's like, I don't know if this is what they're looking for. You don't have the criteria, you know, those kinds of things. So I would say that's the scariest. I've had a few, you know, technical mishaps have happened in some of the big stages that I've been on. It sounds weird, but those are actually kind of fun for me because I'm like, oh, let's play. Like I've done this talk a number of times, or I love being on stage, so I already feel very comfortable. And it keeps you from going on autopilot. So I had one talk where, you know, I was up on stage, it's going, my slides were working just fine. And we got to the point, and it was honestly the only part in the presentation where I kind of needed my slides because it was a visual punchline. And the punchline was, let me show you the Google image results for this. Click. It's this absurd set of images. And like, that is the punchline to the joke. Everything else, you could kind of get away without the visuals. And just as I went to click, and I was like, and of course you are correct, right? And I click and the slides go blank. And I was like, if I had slides, and so I'm like describing the Google image results, right? So and it was like a 3 or 4 minute little thing. And so of course the team is like back there and working, and it was a tight time slot. They were running behind. So I was like, all right, we're just going to keep going. So I just kept talking. And as soon as I get through the part where the visuals like really, really matter, my slides come back up. And I was like, there we go. Right. But I kept going because I know my material. But I've had that happen. I had another time where they had loaded the handout, not the slides. And so there were no animations in it because it was a PDF. And then for some reason, something else wasn't working. And so there was somebody on the other end and they're like, I couldn't, like, the slides wouldn't advance from my side. It was a virtual talk. And I was like, okay, I guess you're going to run these slides for me. And so I just had to incorporate. And if we move forward and if we go to the next slide and what our next point will be, right, but going basically blind and having to signal without being next slide, and like trying to incorporate that into the talk track. That was another one where, I mean, we basically figured that out like 30 minutes before I went on. And I was like, all right, let's play.
When something like that happens, it actually gives you, so it's already, everything is screwed already. So what the hell, right? Let's just do this. So now you start kind of improvising, and that improvisation part usually comes off very nicely for everyone, right? Because you're sort of like the expert of the subject matter. So you kind of have the room to be able to express thoughts or ideas in a different fashion, right? I loved your point about the audience wanting you to succeed. I love that. It's like, I never thought about this from the standpoint that when you're already doing a show or a presentation, or you have a product that you work on, everyone that's seeing that wants you to succeed with it, like everyone, right? And there's no point of being scared about what's going to happen because the outcome already there, like the audience. That's a nice way of thinking that. Hey, I have time for one more question. So cakes, fitness, theater, kite, motorcycling, hiking. Let's talk time management, multitasking, energy consumption, like how this all works. Kind of, if I wanted in like 5-10 minutes just to understand, can I actually do that, all of that, and how this kind of works for you? Any practical tips or knowledge or how you do that?
I mean, I can knock this out in 2 minutes. The answer is I don't do all the things all at once. So the other cheeky but not cheeky answer is I don't have kids. I don't have pets. I don't have any plants. I don't have other dependencies in my life. And I think I'll actually dive into that a bit more, that for folks who do have a lot of dependencies, maybe they're caring for elderly parents, or maybe they've got children or they've got pets. It's really hard if you are not kind of in charge of your own space and the people who are in your life or the responsibilities that are in your life are not flexible. So let's just start with that baseline that, I've made different choices in my life, and that has allowed me to continue to make the types of choices in terms of hobbies. And then the second thing is genuinely, I don't do all the things all the time, right? We're kind of joking that the poor motorcycles are languishing in the garage because we've been kiting and we've been traveling to do some hiking and backpacking. And so we haven't had time to ride the motorcycles. It's not to say that we'll never ride the motorcycles. It's just this summer has been real low on the motorcycles, real high on the kiting and backpacking. The biggest thing I think that I have to balance is work and shows, because shows require you to be in a certain place at a certain time for anywhere from 2 to 3 months between the rehearsals and the performances. So I try really hard to make sure that if I'm going to be traveling a lot for work, then I just don't audition for a show at that point. Or I try to let work know, hey, I'm doing a show. So if we have an option on when we're doing an offsite or who to send to this conference, then I'm looking at doing a show. Is there anything that's coming up? So I do have to have the open conversation. I have to mark my conflicts on my rehearsal schedule. And sometimes that knocks me out of a show because they're like, listen, you're just going to be gone too much. We can't put you in. Or I have to go back to work and say, hey, I'm going to, I would like to do a show. Is there anything big that's coming up that maybe I have to miss? We call it intentional togetherness at Atlassian. And sometimes there will be something happening in the office or, an opportunity to get together with coworkers, but it's happening from 4 to 6. Well, if I know I have to be at rehearsal at 7, stretched, warm, fed, all of that, like there's no way I'm going to make it. And so I would have to skip some of those intentional togetherness moments. So again, I am fortunate that I'm able to make choices that allow me to choose jobs that don't require me to be on the road 75% of the time, or that I'm able to choose companies that respect that work-life balance, that I'm able, I have enough opportunity to do shows that I can still do 2 or 3 shows because there's enough theater around me. But again, when I look at places to live, if I were to leave the Bay Area, a big requirement is how much opportunity is there for me to do theater? Because if there's only one theater and they only do one show a year, that's not going to work for me because I know I have all of these other things. And that means that I might not be able to do a show for 2 or 3 years because schedules don't work. And I might not be able to audition and get in if there's only one opportunity. Like I'm fine. I do well with my performances, but I'm not like, 100%. I get cast 100% of the time, right? I don't get cast every time. And so making sure that I have multiple opportunities to audition so that I'm more likely to get cast. That's another big piece of like looking at that priority list and saying, does this city have this? Does my schedule work with this?
Well, this requires a lot of discipline and a lot of consistency, showing up, being on point, and kind of managing events in your life. Have you ever get tired?
Yes, that's why I literally put it on LinkedIn this morning that my calendar was kind of killing me. Yes, I do get tired. I think that I will say that, most of the stuff that I'm doing, 90% of the time is very energizing to me. And so it's not depleting the battery as much as you might think. There's some like regenerative battery recharge happening from these things. But yes, I take days off from the gym. I, skip the social hour, or I don't audition for a show, even though maybe I could, because it's like, maybe the show is not that interesting, or the season is not that interesting, or like, I'm not willing to drive all the way to this place for this show. So yes, I do get tired, but I do think that in general, I try to pick things that energize me. And again, same thing, like I'll go months sometimes without doing a whole big baking session because I just don't have time. Particularly when I'm in a show, I don't necessarily have time to do as much baking. So making sure that I'm able to lean into the things and not beating myself up that the motorcycles are languishing in the garage, realizing that there's different seasons to lean into the different activities. That's the other part of the discipline, is making sure that I'm not overfilling my life to the point where I can't enjoy the things that I've already put in.
That's a great point. A seasonality and cycles of things, right? So there are different cycles and you can just choose between them and not go into all of them at the same time. Ashley, that's a great close up. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story and sharing your energy. I loved it. Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Thanks for taking all the energy and asking the hard questions, going deep right out of the gates.